Recorded live from the mats of Radical MMA in New York City. The Martial Culture Podcast. Your source for in-depth combat sports and martial arts insights with Coach Rene and Matt Peters. Ring the bell and let's get it on.
Welcome to another episode of the Martial Culture Podcast. Coach Rene here and Matt Peters.
Welcome.
Let's not hesitate. Let's get right into it. We got great guests on the line with us. Rene, would you set the table for us?
Yes. We have two wonderful warriors in the studio today. Kristina Barlaan, who I was aware of many years ago. I think you were training out in Arizona or something back then.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's been a while.
Yeah. And I was like watching a Spider Guard instructor. I'm like, wow. That's good Spider Guard. But since then I've followed your career and I've recommended you to a lot of my female students to see how to play Spider Guard in the gi. But also Professor Erin Herle, who I actually think we might have shared the mats together because you're at Cabrinhas, right?
Yes, I was.
Yes, yeah. I was visiting Cabrinhas a few years ago, and I'm pretty sure we trained together. Because yes. What belt were you about 8 years ago?
8 years ago, probably a blue belt.
Yep. It was.
What was 8 years ago?
Yeah.
2012.
Yes. Yep. And you were really good. Yeah. And it was an afternoon class, and I came and you were very technical, and it was a great role. And I'm almost certain it was you because you were so nice. And we didn't really talk that much, but you gave me a fantastic greeting and welcome. And it's nice to visit academies and to get such a warm greeting from people and just be part of the martial arts family, the brother and sisterhood. But I'm glad I was a nice person. But I would like to hand the mics over to you guys, and whichever order you prefer, just tell us a little about yourself, your amazing, both of you, amazing accomplishments, and then we can also talk about the really important work that you do, which is really why I wanted to have you guys on. You're absolutely inspiration to me, what you guys do. And also, if you ever are in New York, or would like to do some event in New York, I would love to be, and my wife too, we'd love to be at some level part of what your great organization is. But anyway, I'll leave the mic up to you, and please tell us about yourselves, whoever would like to go first.
Kristina, go ahead. Okay. I don't know where to go. All right. Well, yeah, Kristina Barlaan. I'm a first degree black belt under Professor Kayateha. Been training for just over 12 years now. And really it's great being part of this whole podcast thing and starting SubmitTheStigma, which is, I'm a supporter of it, but it really has all just been put together by Erin. And since, we're really good friends, our friendship actually started by fighting each other twice in one day. And we're like, did we just become best friends? And then we did. And so it's like, from that moment on, we've just been always supportive of each other. And when, and Erin will talk more about it, but when she came to me with her ideas with SubmitTheStigma and what she wanted to do, especially with everything that happened with her dad, I was just like, yes, I mean, whatever you need, I'm on it. I'll do it, and I'm, especially because of my own struggles with mental health, mental illness, and of course, being able to still compete at a high level while still having that, I found it really important that I can use that platform to actually speak about these things, and not just about mental illness, but a bunch of other stuff like traumatizing things in the past, and it just really just gave me this platform. So thank you for having me on here.
Wonderful. And you're a true martial artist because you're super humble. But how many times have you won the Worlds? Like 8 or something?
You know what? I actually have never won Worlds at the adult level. I won Master Worlds twice at Black Belt.
Yes, Master Worlds.
Yes. Not yet. Yes, exactly. I have not. Not even at any of the lower belts. But I have pretty much placed every single year that I've competed at Worlds, I pretty much always placed within the top 3. There were only 2 years in which I'd never placed at Worlds, but every single year I had always placed from blue belt to black belt. I'd have always placed.
You're amazing.
So I was in the finals. Yeah. Oh, sorry.
You're amazing, and you only won Masters black belt twice. Oh my God, that's amazing. Come on. And it's just for the listeners that don't know, it's just an age bracket thing. The skill level, I think is incredibly high in all the divisions, and it's a fantastic achievement. But thank you for that introduction. And Erin, do you mind telling about yourself as well?
Yeah, I'm based in LA, and I've been training for 10 years now. I just passed my 2-year anniversary for black belt. I received my black belt under Colbrina Charles. And I also started with Hamala Bahal, and then I lived in New York actually for 2 years. Well, New Jersey,
kidding.
But commuted into the city every day. And I was training under Marcelo Garcia. So I got my blue belt under Hamala, my purple belt under Colbrina, my brown belt under Marcelo, my black belt under Colbrina. And I've always competed and always been kind of similar to Kristina, like just kind of not really getting to the top. Like I won a no-gi world title and Europeans and things like that, but never got the full gold of,
again, no-gi world title. It's amazing. But that's
to me, I'm like, it's not the same.
To me, it is the same. And I think, look at Gordon Ryan's never won gi worlds, but he won no-gi worlds, and he's considered the best.
Not yet.
Yeah, whatever. Anyway, but
right.
fantastic. I actually saw your no-gi world match, and it was pretty awesome. Yeah. I actually, I'll be honest. Yeah. I actually have to be honest that I don't actually watch so much sport jiu-jitsu anymore. I'm really in the more MMA world, but for the top level competitors who I really respect, I definitely watch because you can learn. And I remember seeing your match. It was fantastic. So
yeah, thank you.
Congratulations.
In, MMA.
Yes. You just had a fight 2 nights ago or last night? 2 nights ago.
Yeah, 2 nights ago.
Yeah.
And it was big because it was a year that I had been trying to find a fight and I couldn't. And I actually fought a former teammate from, the beginning of my career. And now I'm training at a different gym and so is she, but she came up in weight for the fight. And I was really, really grateful for that because they were having such a hard time finding anyone who wanted to fight a jiu-jitsu black belt.
Right.
So for me, just being able to fight was so exciting. I ended up finishing the fight. I keep used to saying match, the fight in the second round via TKO, just ground and pound from Mount. Wow. It's funny because people were like, you had it. You had the submission. You could have gone for the arm. Well, my other arm, she kind of clamped it down. And I was like, all right, well, how do I get that arm free so I can go for the arm bar? I punch. So I start punching. I get 2 hands free. And I'm like, this is a lot of fun. I'm going to go with 2 hands now. And then I called it. And I was just like, oh, my God.
No, it's interesting. It's not something I want to talk about right now. But it's actually, for me, my academy is very much more oriented to MMA. So we're always talking about what's efficient. And very often times, if you go for an armbar from Mount, you could lose top position. So I always, my background is also in Japanese jiu-jitsu and Japanese judo. I lived there for many years. So the Japanese have this thing, like every time before you do a submission, you got to soften them up. That's called a temi, right? So I'm like, focus on softening them up. And if they're really soft, just keep softening. And, don't lose the position because you want to go for an armbar that's maybe 60% versus ground and pound that's 80, 90%. 5%,
Exactly.
So,
exactly.
Yeah, it's very different. When I switched over to MMA, that was a long, long time ago. Yeah, it really had to adjust my game, particularly my guard game. But anyway, that's not what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about you guys. So congratulations on your win. And I'd like to just focus back on Kristina. And Kristina, I'm just a little bit more familiar with you, and I know you've been very public with how you started. And it's like every female student I have, I mentioned that how you were originally doing like cardio kickboxing and then you started going to jiu-jitsu and at that time the person who was in your life was not positive. And it's like a really inspiring story how you kind of got out of a bad place and became in a much better place. And if you don't mind talking about it, I would really interested I think it's very inspirational for some people who I know have been in places and martial arts has helped them get to a better place,
Oh, yeah. I definitely don't mind talking about it at all. So I had no idea what jiu-jitsu was until I started training Muay Thai, and it was at Cesar Gracie's Academy, and just so happened to find the place just because it was right next door to a restaurant I was going to eat at with my boyfriend at the time. And this is the boyfriend that was it was a very toxic relationship. It was a toxic 3-year relationship. And a lot of that toxicity came but there's two things going on, right? Like, are you still there?
Yes. Just
okay. Sorry.
Yeah, absolutely.
Really, sorry. It went really, really quiet, and I was like, "Oh no, did it hang up by accident?"
No. Just trying to be listening.
Like, yeah. But yeah, there was a couple of things going on. Like, obviously, he had his own unresolved issues, his own thing. So like, I still to this day believe that he was a good person, but because of all the other crap that had happened to him and things he had went through, it just kind of projected out in a way where it's just kind of like you depend on this person being lower than you so that you can feel strong, and you don't ever want your security being threatened. And so, and for me, mine came from having been sexually assaulted, but believing it was all my fault. So I had this vision of myself that was just complete, I don't say untrue, but it was just like, that's not who I am. That was not my fault. But for him, his side of the story, because I was not cognizant of the fact that what had happened really had happened. Like, yeah, you were assaulted, right? And so on my head, I'm like, oh, I shouldn't have been there. It's all my fault. I had it coming, right? And for him, she's just been with all these different people, and so no one's gonna love you except for me. Like, who's gonna want you? You're pretty much garbage. It's essentially like what that made me feel like. And I was like, you're right. I have to be with this person for the rest of my life because no one's gonna love me because I'm damaged, I'm broken. And so our relationship was like that. Anytime I started feeling good about myself, anytime I started doing something progressive with my life, like first it was art school, like he would find a way to hurt himself so that I would give up whatever I was doing so I would take care of him. Because if you don't take care of me, then then I'm not going to take care of you. And who's going to love you? No one, right? I was really, really convinced of this. And somehow we both at the time that were just like, we were interested in starting martial arts. Like, I want to do Muay Thai. We both want to do some sort of like kickboxing, Muay Thai, because we were watching a lot of different martial arts movies. But, for so long, I had to put up with this relationship that like, okay, you don't want me to do something, I won't do it. Because if I do that, that means it's going to compromise our relationship, and that means I'm going to be alone, and no one's going to love me. So I would give up anytime he said, no, I don't want you doing that. And he didn't ever have a good reason for it, right? So he'd find for ways to get me to fail out of classes or not go to school in general. It was really, really bad. And after a year of doing Muay Thai, one of my friends was like, I think you should try doing jiu-jitsu again. When I first started, someone tried showing me jiu-jitsu, and no gi didn't make any sense. I didn't like it. But when he asked me to try doing it again, the gi, I'm like, well, this makes so much sense. I loved it, right? And I remember coming home and telling, my boyfriend, like, I tried out jiu-jitsu. I think I could be really good at it. I loved it. And right away, he was just like, no, you're not going to be good at it. They're just saying that because the guys just want to touch you. They just want to mess with you. They really don't value it at all. You're not going to be good at it. You shouldn't do it. I don't want you doing it. And in the past, I would have been, okay, yeah, you're right. I won't do it. But something in me was just like, I don't understand why you don't want me doing something that could be really, really good for me. Like, one, like, I feel like I could be good at this. Two, I feel like it could be really, really good for me. And then right away, he's just like, all right, who are you going to cheat on me with? Who are you sleeping with? Who are you going to leave me for at the gym? And I'm like, well, it's like, none of that. I just want to do jiu-jitsu. He was just so insecure. And at that point, he wasn't even training anymore. I was still paying for his fees, but he wasn't training anymore because he felt so insecure. He didn't.
So you were paying for him?
Yeah, I was paying for him. I was paying for everything, right? I was paying for 2 memberships, but only I was training. He wouldn't go in. He'd always have an excuse like, like the guys are always making fun of me, or the guys don't think I'm manly enough. I'm like, well, you don't show up to train. Like, I train and you don't. And you always have some sort of excuse. And
so sorry that you had to go through that.
Yeah,
That's
was really
terrible.
bad. And so at the point that I kept training and he would just not go, he's like, oh, you're definitely going there because you're trying to see somebody else. And I'm like, no, I'm going there because I want to get better, you know? And yeah, it was a really, really bad like breakup. There was like the first time I was like having a conversation about it, like it started in the car, and I'm having a full on, like, not full on panic attack, but like raging emotional breakdown. I'm crying. I'm like smashing my hand against the window, hoping that it will break. It wouldn't break. I'm like kicking and screaming. I'm like having like a tantrum. And at that point, I didn't realize that was panicking, manifesting physically in my body, and me freaking out. Like, I just don't understand, you know? And like getting out of the car, him like chasing me with the car, like following me in the street. And like, it was just like, I think about it now in retrospect, and a lot of I haven't even talked about that before in any of my other interviews, because it's like, man, I really did block that out. Like, that really did happen, you know, him following me in the street, trying to get me to go back in the car. And I'm like crying and so frustrated and so angry, but can't actually fully being angry. I was talking with Erin this morning about it, like how it's really hard for me. I can't be angry. I just get very emotional and I can't control my emotions. And I just get angry at myself as opposed to being angry at the person. And I internalize everything. And, finally got back to the house, and like, it's just like, yeah, you need to leave because, you know, and it was, yeah, he just like, you know, was mad. He was like throwing stuff. He had to put stuff in his like black garbage bag, and he's like, you're going to regret this, you know, and then he didn't. Was gone. And once he didn't like, regret it. Once he got out the room, and my mom's like, are you okay? I'm like, it's fine. And as soon as he was out of the house, I was just like, oh my God, I feel so much better. You know, like, it's gone. It's done.
Wow, that's amazing. And then you never look back.
No, I definitely have not. I'm not saying that I still struggled with, like, I'd say relationships or being able to connect with people in a certain way, because yes, I had a shitload of issues. Sorry, language. I had a lot of issues tied with wanting to be loved and wanting to be accepted. But I mean, the first time I was sexually assaulted, I was 12 or 13. And the first time I ever talked about it to anybody and actually admitted, you know, and again, there's also a string of other instances that happened from the time I was 13 to the time, I think the last time I was ever assaulted, I think it was around 17 years old or something like that. So I never told anyone about it until I was 26. And that was my ex-fiance when I was living in Arizona, my former instructor. He was the first person I ever told about any of it, right? I told him about all these things that had happened. And up until that moment, I'd always put all the self-blame. And it was once I said it out loud to another person, and then seeing that look on their face and how they're looking at me, and they're like, you know, that was really messed up. Like, I can't believe you went through that. And at the time, I was just like, oh, yeah, it wasn't that bad. It's just, you know, that's just something you go through. I'm like, no, that isn't just something you go through. That's not normal. That's not, like, this happened to you. I'm like, oh shit, yeah, that really did happen. And that's when I started being able to talk about it, you know, because I had just always felt like I have to be with whoever likes me back because, you know, because of all the stuff that happened in my past, and it really didn't happen that way. And just having this understanding of how the mind works and how we go through these mental gymnastics to kind of justify the bad actions that people have done to us, you know, because we're powerless. We were literally powerless at the time to do anything. And so we kind of try to make ourselves feel like we have power. And it's the same thing that happens when dealing with mental illness. It's like, you know, society is telling us that we should be able to control it, that we should have the power to do it. And we don't. We really don't. Like, we can't just think happy thoughts. We can't just be happy. I mean, yes, you could get out of a bad relationship. You can get out of a bad situation, like, you know, either work or training environment. But in the mind, that's still not our control. Like, if our brain says you're going to be depressed today, it's like, well, I guess we're depressed. You know, you're going to be anxious today, like you're going to be anxious. There are things you can do to be mindful of it. But at the end of the day, sometimes you just don't know why it is the way that it is. And really, martial arts has given me, like, one, the strength to, like, okay, whatever I can control, I'm going to do my best with that. And if I can't control today, if it's really too much for me, it's okay that it like overwhelms me for as long as I know that I can keep going and I can come back to it, or I can try again. You know, find a way that didn't work, we can try again and find another way that might work. Maybe it'll work, maybe it'll fail, I don't know, but I'm always able to come back and keep trying. And jiu-jitsu has really been that gift to me. You know, I didn't get it really with Muay Thai, but jiu-jitsu was the one thing that was like, this makes sense.
There's something, I don't know what it is. And I started studying martial arts in 75, and I've gone through many different martial arts. There's something about Brazilian jiu-jitsu. I don't really know what it is, you know, because I did judo, which is similar, but it doesn't have it. I mean, I guess all martial arts have it at somewhere, but there's something therapeutic about it that allows you to pass through and digest trauma that happened to you. And thank you so much for sharing that. I hope it really helps some people. It's funny because the first time I talked about a trauma that happened to me was actually on this podcast, where when I was about 12 years old, someone tried to murder me and set me on fire. And I poured lighter fluid and tried to set me on fire, murdering. And it's funny that the only person my parents didn't know, nobody knew, only Matt was the first person I told. And it was just like, oh, right. Yeah, I forgot about that. And, you know, you kind of, like you kind of, you shut it down. I'll be a man. I've done not whine about this shit. You know, for real men, don't complain. And it's just awful. And it just eats you alive. And I had a lot of insecurity, and this podcast is not about me, so I'll just leave it there. But a lot of insecurity because I'd already been doing martial arts for 7 years, and I couldn't defend myself. So I'm like a failure at martial arts. And, you know, and then there was, the little negative voice that you suck and you'll never be good at anything. It didn't come from anyone else, but it definitely came from me. And when I moved to Japan, I trained, and, you know, little by little, I had some therapeutic moments. But when I started doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, something just changed. And my very first MMA match was when it really happened, where, you know, it was like, you ever played the game Tetris? And it's like, you know, you get a level. So it was like, I won the MMA match, and suddenly it was like this Tetris level, and everything fell away. And from that moment on, I can say my pre-MMA and post-MMA, I'm a completely different person. Like, I was talking to my wife about last night. It's like, I'm kind of wired now to be happy. And it's weird. It just changed me completely. Like, literally in seconds, I felt it. Something, just all this baggage I was carrying, all this stuff, the self-doubt, everything, it just went away. And that is the peak moment of my life and my experience in the 50 years I've been on this planet. And but I when you were telling your story, I got kind of emotional because I was really relating to what you said. And again, thank you very much for sharing. And I don't want to steer the podcast to me. I want to talk about you guys. But if you don't mind, I'd like to bring it to Erin and talk about her amazing journey. I know you had a family life and things that led to you going in this direction of helping people work to submit the stigma. But I'll put it in your words. Yes, tell me about your background and how you know, everything you think would be, you know, be interesting and to our listeners.
Yeah. So I had always been like a troublesome child, like I think a lot of people can relate to. But I remember I was at a private school. My preschool teacher, you know, told my mom, like, should you get her tested for ADHD? Because I think you should. And so she takes me to the doctor, the same doctor that delivered me. And he's like, nah, she's just smart. You know, and so my mom's like, phew, okay, cool. We dodged that bullet. But I think I really did display a lot of issues growing up with anxiety and depression. And I didn't know how to handle my really, really extreme emotions. And I didn't have like true coping mechanisms. And so, you know, I was pretty lost. Like I had bands, like I played trumpet in middle school and high school. I just sort of, I don't know, hung out with meth addicts, never did a drug in my life, but was just like found hardcore music and was going to shows and stuff. And I was this online forum, and there was a guy that was coming out to California for a jiu-jitsu tournament. And I was like, I don't know what this wrestling thing is that you have going on, but if you want to hang out, we should do that. And he's like, yeah. So, you know, I picked him up and he's like, can we go back to the tournament to check on my friends and how they're doing? And I was like, yeah, sure. Whatever you want to do. And I saw jiu-jitsu for the first time, which was the 2008 Pans in Carson. And I saw a female match and I was like, this is so cool. And I feel like I've always just sort of like roughhouse with the guys. Like I used to wrestle with them. I used to like moon people out of the cars and just kind of like be that jackass that, you know, the boys were too. And so I finally, you know, looked up jiu-jitsu, but it took me a year to get in to an academy because I had acne and I had low self-esteem and anxiety, and I just didn't know what to do. So I knew of a couple people from the hardcore scene that had gone to a gym near my work. So finally I just got the guts one day and I walked in and they're like, yeah, come back tomorrow, class starts. Here you go. Took one class and signed a 2-year contract. It was like, all right, this is cool. And from then on, it was just something that I knew that I had chosen. It wasn't like Girl Scouts or my mom put me in or anything like that. It was my decision. I was working, I was going to college full time, and then I was training. So the training was huge for me because there's a support system and then you see people regularly and then there's goals. Like I remember looking at my attendance card and I realized, cool. So if I train in 5 more classes, I'm going to get a stripe because there's a mark there. So I exhausted myself. I was going like 2 a days and I remember I was like falling apart. And Hamala was like, yo, what's going on with you? And I was like, well, I saw that I could get a stripe, so I just wanted to speed up the process. He's like, you realize that's a suggestion, right? Like, it doesn't mean that you're going to get it. Like, it's like, and I was like, oh, so of course I didn't get it. And then, I did because obviously, I kept on going and I competed within 3 months and it was exhilarating. I thought it was so amazing. I'd never done anything where people were really watching me. Like, yeah, I was in band, but like, that's a band. It wasn't just my screw up. It's everyone else's too, if that were to happen. So yeah, I ended up getting like 3rd at my first tournament. And I thought it was awesome. I just kept on competing. And I ended up going full time at 2012. And, all this time I had been in a toxic relationship myself. And I finally had found, a drug. Actually, this was prior. So I found a drug thing on Craigslist that was like, try this drug and we'll pay you $500. And I'm like, sweet. So I go there and they're like, do you have anxiety? And I'm like, I think I do. So I answer this questionnaire and they're like, yep, you have generalized anxiety disorder, GAD. And I was like, cool. Anyways, what are we going to do? So he's like, all right, you're going to take this and you're going to come in every week and you're going to fill out the questionnaires, blah, 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 blah. Well, I had a lot of panic attacks. I still don't know if I had the placebo or not, but yeah, I was pretty neurotic during that time. And so I got the $500 and I told everybody like, yeah, I took this drug, but like I got $500, like, which was big back then being a college student and whatnot. So like that kind of just goes with the stigma, right? Like we can't just say, yeah, I went to the doctor and I have generalized anxiety disorder and now I'm taking it in my own hands. Like I wasn't ready for that. And so I started going to a therapist after a toxic relationship when I was about 21, I want to say 21 or 22. And, I actually brought up the ADD thing and he said the exact same thing. He was like, you either have ADD or you're just smart. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to go with the ADD thing. So I stayed talking with him once a week for a year. And then I decided to go and get medication because I had a close friend who I grew up with that said, my anxiety and depression went away when I started treating the ADHD. So that gave me the confidence. So I still was super, super afraid of antidepressants because I had always heard if you took the wrong one, it could give you suicidal thoughts. And in my head, I'm like, well, if I kill myself, then how the hell am I supposed to try another drug? Because I'm already dead. And that was just my thinking, my scary thinking. So I went on Ritalin or Concerta, which is a slow dosage. But I didn't really it's almost like I would not brag about it, but I bragged because at a public university, I went to Cal State Northridge. It's the only public university in the LA area, one of them. And there's so many people. So it's kind of like you get in via you have a good enough GPA and a good enough SAT score and you're in. So there's a lot of budget cuts going on because it's public and, it's hard to get classes, right? So you have to crash them and everybody's got to take the GE courses. You got to take the speech, you got to take whatever, astronomy, geology, whatever. And, so if I went to the disabilities office and I took my diagnosis of ADD and I said, look, I need to sign up for services. And the service that I wanted was just to sign up earlier for classes. And they were like, all right, well, you can come in here to take tests. We can have a note taker for you. And I was like, no, I'm good. Like, I'm totally capable. I'm just going to use this paper. I'm going to use this diagnosis. And that's another, part of stigma that was huge because I just didn't even have the confidence to kind of own it again and like really research it and go, how do I help myself? It was more just like, I'm crazy. That's it. And, it wasn't until like later on when I started realizing that people started listening to me. I started a zine called Pulling Guard Zine, and I was doing interviews and whatnot. Then I started working for Gracie Mag, and I was, people wanted to reach out to me so that they could get their fame, right? They'd be like, write an article about me, or I'd go cover all the tournaments and whatnot. So people started listening to what I had to say, and they liked the stories that I was telling of these events and whatnot. And, I've always been super personal. I've had a blog since I was a white belt. Always had a disclaimer, I'm just a white belt, but I had it till I was a purple belt, actually. So it wasn't until 2015 I was living in New Jersey. At the time, I was dating Gianni Grippo. That's what I moved to New York for love, and we were training together every day, same routine every single day. And I get this call late at night from my aunt, and I was like, all right, I don't feel like answering. Like, I'm definitely not a person who likes talking on the phone. I prefer texting. So I was like, oh, she'll leave a message if it's something important. She leaves a message, and she's like, I need you to call me right away. So I did, and I didn't know if it was something about my mom or what. And she told me that my dad died, and that he had shot himself. And it was just like, whoa, like I don't have a dad. And I remember like just freaking out. I couldn't talk to my mom because the police were talking with my mom, and she was dealing with all this stuff. And at the hospital, my sister was there, and I spoke to my sister. And I remember when I hung up and I didn't really know what to do, I called a friend at the time, and who I knew that had lost her dad to cancer when she was younger. And she was very vocal about every time that, his anniversary of his death comes along, and she talks about being a daddy's girl and stuff like that. I called her and I said, I don't know what to do, but I don't have a dad anymore, and you don't have a dad. So now I can relate to you. And that was like, I look back on it now and I'm just like, well, that was weird. Like, I can't imagine like what she was thinking when she got that call, but she talked me down, and I went the next day to the gym, and I told Marcelo, and, I got on a plane and I went home, and I didn't want to go home until everything was cleaned up. Right. And everything was kind of more kosher, and my mom chose to stay in the house. So I stayed in the house with her. We actually spoke to a medium friend who my cousin's friend was a medium and stuff. And for whatever reason, I almost thought that my dad was a ghost in my house, and I couldn't even sleep in my own bed. I was 24, 25, and I couldn't even sleep in my own bed. I couldn't be alone in the dark because I don't know. It manifested into something really scary. So.
Well, you went through something very traumatic, for sure.
Yeah, right away we went to a grief counselor, me, my sister, my mom, and that helps so much, like getting the professional help and just having that outside perspective, because, you're in your head so much and you're just feeling all of these things that you don't understand your emotions. So that really helped us. And from then I was like, I've always been super, super transparent online, and I need to tell people, but I'm gonna use this as like a badge of honor, because there's a lot of people who don't say the cause of death because they don't want to be seen as like the blame, or that they should have done something, or whatever it is. Like, it's an eyesore, right? The word, committed suicide, it implies that it's a crime. Like, I remember reading about it. I think it was like in France a long time ago. Like, you didn't get a funeral. Your body got dragged behind the wagon for all to see, like throughout the city. Like, it was self-murder. And, I know that's a lot different these days. And I knew what it felt like. I know what it feels like to want to die. And, to have that in my family history now, I wanted to really put it out there. So I found the National Alliance on Mental Illness. They have a chapter in every state. And I decided to create a GoFundMe. So one, I could say, this is what happened to me, but let's focus on the positive and see. And, this is sad because it's not just me. It's everybody that deals with suicide. It happens every day, and we need to make people more aware of it. So yeah, you can feel sorry for me, but like, let's feel sorry for everybody. And that was my feeling. It wasn't just like poor me, poor my dad, poor my family. It was just like poor anyone who has to deal with this. Like, especially when there's no note left, like my dad. And you really don't know. There's questions, and you learn that the questions don't really matter because the answers don't matter. And so I wanted to turn to positive. I received over $6,700, which is, it didn't really matter, but it was the sheer like number of donations, and all these people came out with support in the jiu-jitsu community that were like, dude, I suffered from that, or I've never told anyone that I suffer. And so I just sort of like stood up like freaking Hunger Games. Like, I volunteered as tribute, and just, I made it so out there. And the first time I ever shared it on the podium, I wrote a sign, and it was No Gi Pans, my first brown belt tournament in 2015. And I was winning, and I was in my last match, the final, and I was up 7-0, and I got armbarred. And I was just devastated because I was like planning on making it known. I was like, I want to be on the top of the podium. I want to show that like successful people can still suffer from mental illness, or vice versa. And so, you know, I went off and cried. But in the meantime, like, do you know, like in Mean Girls, when she's so angry and there's this whole scene of her like,
I've never seen Mean Girls.
She's grabbing a piece of paper. Oh my God, we can't be friends. But there's like this scene and she gets this burn book out, and it's like her, like just this long scream of her like writing down all this stuff in a book. That was me, just like crying while I get this piece of paper from the IBJJF and I write, you know, submit the stigma of mental illness. And I had to do it with a pen. So I'm like scribbling to make it, you know, big letters and stuff. Well, they did the podium without me. And then I got crap for it online. The coach of the girl who got first was like, you know, you should really show up for podiums, you know, because just because you didn't win, you still need to fill the podium for the person who did and show them respect. And I'm like, absolutely. Except I was just on the other side of the gym, and in New York, the gymnasium is not very big. You could have found me. I was so angry. So I missed the podium, and I went into the absolute, defaulted third, didn't care, held the sign anyways. Gave the sign to Gianni to hold, gave the sign to Abraham Marche, to Megan Neville, to various people who wanted to support it. And then when I competed again was the Nogi Worlds, and I won. And it was just like so perfect. Everything came together. And then I remember, you know, Kristina held up the sign. And then, you know, Patty Fontes, who was also on the podium, was grabbing the sign with her. And then Angelica says, you know, Megan Neville was on the podium with Angelica. And then Angelica holds the sign too, Angelica Galvan. And all these people, I had one blue belt girl come up and say, yeah, I don't know you, but I would love to hold that sign up on the podium. And I was like, oh my God, this is so amazing. It's kind of taking a life of its own. That's what happened. So it's Submit the Stigma with the hashtag. It's meant to be shared. And it's, you know, now a 501c3, and we accept, you know, donations, and we do seminars and whatnot. We want to work on a lot of things, but the overall goal has always been just awareness. And the idea of jiu-jitsu helping me so much is something that my dad could have, obviously I wouldn't say my dad should do jiu-jitsu, but just something of that effect helped me so much to find a place and have identity and know that I wasn't without support no matter what happened in my life. And I really showed when strangers were coming out and talking to me. And to this day, I think Kristina can attest to this too. Like, you put something out there, maybe you're having a bad day, and all of a sudden your followers who you've never met are messaging you, telling you how inspirational you are just because you said you had a bad day, because they have a bad day. But knowing that that happens to other people is so huge, or knowing how to deal, because we say, okay, well, we had a bad day, but we did this, or, you know, tomorrow's going to be better. And it's okay to have a shit day every once in a while. And people are like, hell yeah, thank you. Thank you. Not for permission, but, you know, just
it's awesome.
Know that that's okay.
Like you said, you know, there's people want to hide the shame, especially, you know, I lived in Asia for a long time, and the, you know, mental illness is very, very, you know, hush hush, looked down on, and you can't see the help. And one of the things I want to say is one of the most famous MMA coaches, Robert Fowles, took his own life. Someone who I really respect, Carl Tanswell, was an MMA coach in the UK, took his own life. And recently, this is just very recently, two judo players, one American, Jim Hatton, and who was Jack Hatton, I'm sorry. He was an amazing U.S. judo national team guy, and he took his life. And then just a few months later, Craig Fallon, who went to the Olympics, and he represented the United Kingdom, also took his own life. And the commonality between all these things is it took everybody around them by surprise. They never said anything, as far as I know. Obviously, I'm not in these people's lives, but you know, if they had reached out, if they had seen, you know, and there's something about being like a tough guy, and this is how I mentioned you guys before. It's like, you know, oh, you want to be a guy, you can't do this, you can't talk to people about this, you can't do this, and it is just so fucking just total bullshit. And it's not the way to a happy life. It's a way to misery, and also feeling insecure and not self-actualizing in any way, shape, or form. And you know, if I had a cold, I would go to a doctor. If I want to learn how to do an armbar, I'm going to go, you know, see you and have an expert teach me how to do an armbar. If I want to do whatever, learn how to cook, I'm going to cook as well. Well, guess what? Your brain is a machine. And, you know, if you go to an expert and you seek help, and it's the way it should be. It's just a very, very sad thing, and you guys are doing amazing work. Let me turn it over to my co-host Matt, because I'm as usual dominating and the mic, and but I know he's amazing, has always amazing thoughts to share. So.
Wow, no pressure. Kristina, you said something interesting when you were talking about you telling your story to, I believe you said your ex-fiance. That you didn't really, when you told him what happened. And he was like, wow, that's a big deal. You're like, nah, it's not really. There's like a lot of people feel that way, especially in the female world, that things happen to them and they just are supposed to happen to them. That's one of the symptoms of being a woman. And
in the patriarchy.
For sure.
Yeah.
And, the stigma of just having the conversation about it and bringing it to the light is such an important thing to do. And I really commend you guys for that.
I have to say that every single woman I know, on a personal level, not every single woman I know, but every single woman I know on a personal level has had some type of sexual assault, victimization.
Yeah. It's like they say, like,
yeah, every single one. And
yeah,
go ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh no, yeah. I was just kind of piggybacking on 1 in 4 has experienced some sort of sexual assault, and it's crazy because. Yeah, like I think about that moment when I was talking about it and opening up finally, like, oh, this happened when I was 13, this happened when I was 15, this happened when I was, 16, this happened when I was 17. And I think his face was shocked, his jaw was dropped. He was looking at me like what the hell, And I think I was smiling when I was telling the story, and it's not like smiling like I'm happy, but kind of like, yeah, so this kind of happened and that sucked. And yeah, I was just wondering why it happened this way. But, yeah, that I was, that sucks. But the look on my face, like it wasn't pained. Like there was not like that acceptance, like actualization that what I'm talking about until I finished what I had said. And then I looked at his face and I saw this, it's like this thing I saw the other day. It's like, you don't realize how messed up the things that are done to you until you tell it to another person, like out loud, right? And then you see the reactions. Like you don't ever really realize how messed up it is because again, we compartmentalize, we do again all the mental gymnastics to justify what had happened so that it's okay. And we do this so that we can live on with our lives, so we're not stuck in that traumatic moment. When that relationship ended, when my ex-fiance and I, we split and I moved back home, it was like that realization, like, oh man, like the reason why I got into that relationship in the first place is because I was literally trying to run away from all of this trauma that I was not willing to admit was trauma. Right. And the thing is, as like at this point too, I had already received, medical treatment for depression and anxiety. I was seeing a psychiatrist. I had therapy sessions. I was on Paxil, I believe I was on. And even that, like to get that help was a struggle. For years I was telling my parents that like I was struggling with like, I don't feel right. Like I had suicidal thoughts, and I remember like the first time that I attempted suicide and then being like, I wrote out letters and made videos like the night before. And then I woke up the next day and I'm like, fuck, I'm still alive. And I had to go to school and I didn't tell anybody. So like, I'm just going around school and everyone was just like, man, you look like crap. You look like crap. And I'm like, yeah, you look really bad. And I'm like, hell yeah. I think I'm just sick. I didn't tell anybody. And I'm like, yeah, I literally tried to like overdose on pills the night before and it didn't work. And I'm shocked at this reality. And I'm like, fuck, why am I still here? Why am I still here? And for whatever reason, like, I don't remember too much after that day. I remember the day, but I don't remember what happened, like the process afterwards. I kind of picked myself up and still pleading with my parents, like, I need help. And like, no, it's just in your head. You just need to stop complaining. You just need to be positive. You need to smile. You just need to stop being lazy. You need to work hard. And I'm like, man, like, it's so hard. It's really, really hard. Like, you're not hearing what I'm saying. And it took for them to see me have an actual panic attack in the car for them to be like, oh my God, yeah, you need help. And I'm like, wow, it's only when I have this extreme actual breakdown, screaming, crying, can't breathe. My body is like, for me, when I have panic attacks, my hands ball up. I get into literally a fetal position and I can't move. That was the first time seeing it. And that was the first time like, okay, let's get you to a doctor because that's not healthy. And I'm like, fuck, I've been trying to tell you for years. And that was when I was, I think, 18 or 19 where I finally was able to get help. But even with that, so, okay, we're talking about the anxiety and the depression. And of course, all the stuff with the sexual assault, that of course gave to like only intensify the feelings of like depression and anxiety, which is like, I have no worth. What am I doing here? And moving to Arizona to be in this relationship was just like, okay, well, it's going to be a fresh start, right? I have a fresh start. Nobody knows me here. I have this new person in my life who's really, really supportive, really positive. I can leave all that behind. And, things changed. I had to, after like 5 years, we decided like, things ended and I moved back home and it was like suddenly I had to confront these things again. And I was not prepared. I mean, I was, but it wasn't. Like at this point, I was like, all right, I'm vocal. I'm speaking out about, self-worth. I'm speaking about being vocal about and not being ashamed by our trauma, like, not staying silent, not keeping quiet, and actually illuminating the light so that we're not suffering by ourselves. And in the fact, by, again, bring a light to that, it's like you're going to find other people who have also suffered the same thing or something very similar and also felt the same feelings of guilt and shame and blame and like it's all my fault, I should have done something, I should have fought back. And it's like, wow, like, in the moment you're paralyzed, you don't know what to do sometimes. And it's just almost easier to just let it happen because, there's all these other, a whole myriad of other things where it's like, mine was messed up. It's like, I don't want to hurt this other person. I don't want to hurt their feelings. Like this person is literally physically assaulting me right now. And I don't want to hurt their feelings by telling them no or pushing them off of me or saying stop. Or in some cases where you do say stop, but you don't say stop loud enough. Or you don't say no loud enough because you're so afraid. And it is kind of like, it's just crazy. Like, even when I say this out loud now, it's like I'm not necessarily going through it, but I think of all the little milestones of which I had to confront certain things, without knowing it. Like when I came back home, seeing certain areas like, oh, this is the first place that it happened. Like the first time that anyone had ever sexually assaulted me, that's the place, without meaning to visit that place. And then you see it and you're just like, oh no, panic attack. And then having to have that kind of catharsis with that moment in that place and saying like, okay, I'm not 13-year-old me isn't stuck inside that storage container anymore. They're not stuck there. They're not, or that shipping container. They're not there. I'm outside. I grew up. I'm an adult now. I'm like, I can let go. Okay to let go. And
well, you're an amazing, strong woman. Amazing. I don't want to interrupt, but I want to say one thing is I teach a lot of self-defense. A lot of what I do is oriented towards neurobiology, neurochemistry. And our limbic system works in a way that, people think it's fight or flight, but it's actually fight, flight, freeze. And this is actually used against women all the time. Like, why didn't you fight back? Well, that's a misunderstanding of how the neurobiology works. Animals, almost all mammals have fight, flight, or freeze, and it's a protective mechanism. And, it's just completely wired into who we are. If you don't feel that you can survive the encounter and you don't feel you can run away, most animals freeze. And you can see that with almost all animals if you own any pet. When they're afraid, a lot of times they freeze and they shake. And it in no way means that someone's at fault or whatever, right? Whatever. It's just like, that's just a bunch of bullshit. Anyway, I didn't even know. Let me continue what you're saying. Go ahead, please. So that helped me. I can be vocal about this. I started being vocal about it with the women's jiu-jitsu community. And I think at the time that I started speaking out loud about it was during a women's open mat Inspire, which I'm hoping to bring life back into that since I haven't been able to touch it in a while. It was my first time I had this women's open mat that I put together, and this one had close to 100 women on the mat. I was like, this is going to be the first time I'm going to speak about this publicly, And it was because I decided to speak up publicly, or the reason why I chose to speak out about it was during that time there was
a case where someone in the jiu-jitsu community had sexually assaulted a teammate, and it was, caught on camera, and it was this big whole thing. And so everyone was talking about it. I'm like, wow, now more than ever, I feel like it is really important for me to speak out, like in this case, like the girl was, she was drunk, she trusted her friends, she trusted her teammate to get her home safely. And
you're talking about the Lloyd Irving incident, right?
Which one?
Are you talking about the Lloyd Irving incident or a different?
I can't remember what team this guy was from.
No worries.
I can't remember. No worries. But it did happen in the New York or East Coast area.
Okay. Yeah, there's the famous one was in DC where some teammates under the Lloyd Irving team were involved in an assault of a woman, and
it was the girl and it was a parking structure, correct?
Yes, that's right. And she was the secretary.
Okay, yeah, right, it's the same one then. Yeah.
Yeah, terrible situation. And we live in this world where it's like unfortunately they were, and I will say unfortunately they were vindicated in court. And if they have a problem with that, they can come see me. But it's like the lack of respect and lack of humanity that showed in that, aside from the sexual assault, is just like, what kind of world do we live in where people do that before the assault took place, before the assault?
Yeah.
What are you, how do we treat people with such disrespect and lack of empathy and humanity before the sexual assault I'm talking about, but of course that happened too. But anyway, thank you for sharing. And I think your voice is an incredibly strong voice out there, and for people to overcome what they have, and also to come out of that shame spiral. I personally find you incredibly inspiring. And Matt, anything else to?
Well, how can people connect with you and spread your message?
Well, I'm very active on social media, particularly on Instagram. Definitely there's a lot of jiu-jitsu stuff in there, but a lot of it pertains is again, I use jiu-jitsu. Obviously it has changed my life. It saved my life. Has gotten me out of bad relationships and bad situations, and made me more aware, and has put me in contact with really, really good people, like Erin. Erin's one of my best friends, mm-hmm. and we don't even live next to each other. She's like like my sister, right? When she ever comes home, she's like, yeah, she's my adopted white sister. Like my mom treats her like her daughter, and then her mom treats me like her daughter, and then and we were just like this family, and a lot of that becomes because we are the way that we are. And it was just so easy to talk to each other about it, and having shared experiences and being able to speak openly and not feel judged, or not have someone look at me and be like, oh, poor you're this broken thing, and still, despite these things, still like, wow, I'm awesome. I am awesome, and so like when Erin and I are together, it's just like, it's this big, like a lot of energy, a lot of like, man, we're just laughing, we're smiling. And it's not a show. It's not like we're showing off everything. It's just like, we generally just feel really good around each other because we don't have to hide anything.
Right.
It's that freeing that I can be vulnerable around her, but I feel safe. And because I feel I can have that vulnerability and that safety with her, I feel strong.
And I feel like, well, go ahead, please.
Oh no, yeah, I was just like, because we have that strength, it's like, it's so important that we use that for something, again, like our quote unquote antics and our personalities, like they're not for show. Like that's really, really us. We are just two weirdos. Yes.
No, but I'd say one thing
we just fully embraced it.
Community in the martial arts, and it doesn't even matter what martial art, but particularly I think when you compete and you see the same people over there, or you come to the academy and you see the same people over and again, there's a bond that is so strong, and it allows you to have your clan, have your tribe, and then you can heal. And also I want to say a thing about vulnerability. A lot of men feel that like showing vulnerability is weakness, but really showing vulnerability is true strength. saying, hey, I'm hurting here, and there's a martial, I don't think he'd want to be mentioned on the podcast right now. But he's a famous martial artist and he's going through a tough time. And, I shout out to him. He's a very public figure, but he's going through a really tough time. And I really respect that he's posting a lot about how he's just hurting. He's separated half a world away from his kids, and his life is turned around, and he also has struggles with depression, and he's coming out and he's saying, hey, if there's anybody here who's feeling like me, you're not alone. And I think it's important that we find our tribe, and we also understand that everybody has vulnerability. Everyone, the myth of this John Wayne or whatever, it's just such bullshit. And it's so pernicious, and you can't be a man when you're happy like that, and you can't be with a wonderful, strong woman when you're so broken, and you can't appreciate wonderful, strong women like the two of you. And I'm very honored to have been able to speak to you today. Just to finish, Erin, I'd like to any thoughts, anything you'd like to share as well. I'd love to have you on back because we, a little further about your MMA experiences and things like that. But here, anything to finish out.
Yeah. Like I say, at every seminar that I teach, even if it's not a Submit the Stigma seminar, I always tell people what you're saying about the bond and how you see each other every day. You can also, be aware of your teammates. And if someone is down, someone is off, like you're going to be able to tell. You see someone so often, and you're in obviously a close connection with them when you train with them. So do yourself a favor, do everyone else a favor, and just, you see someone feeling down, make sure that you reach out to them and say, hey, are you feeling okay? Hey, I'm concerned about you. Hey, you're doing all right. And maybe they don't talk. Maybe they don't explain, but they don't need to. Maybe they do. Maybe you just sit there and listen. Whatever it is, you could help someone a lot. Just, they go home that night feeling like, wow, someone does care. And unfortunately, with depression and mental illness and stuff, we tend to think that we're a burden, or that we don't want to burden someone else with our woes, right? And that's just not the case. I tell people, like, let people care about you. Let people have the opportunity to guide you through whatever you're going through. Let them help you. And, also just instructors need to be aware that, people do have panic attacks. People, you have to be aware that people aren't just weak because they don't want to train, or because something upsets them, or because like someone doesn't pair up with them for class. Like, I used to break down and go cry if I didn't have anyone to train with. I mean, and I was already, competing at the highest level at my belt ranks, and I was still affected by that. So there's a lot going on in people's heads, and if they let you in, then you should be grateful. And also just sharing yourself with other people is always important. There's a time and place. Obviously, you're not going to say like, so my dad died by suicide 5 years ago, and like in the middle of a drill. But it's just important to share yourself with others because the community is so tight already. So Submit the Stigma we have a website, SubmitTheStigma.org, and it is available to people who want to buy patches, and we have some apparel and whatnot. And then we also have the Facebook and the Instagram, which are run by my Toronto friend, Valerie Brosseau, who actually, I think it's today, she's doing a TED Talk in Montreal, about mental health awareness. She actually was one of the best in her district in Durham region, the best volunteer. She actually has attempted suicide and has firsthand experience, and now helps others and runs the Submit the Stigma up there, and it's been beautiful. So that's another person to have on and consider. So social medias are all there, the patches are available and whatnot, and all I ask is that you share, that you speak about it, and that's it. That's people are always like, wow, what can I do to help? Well, that's it. Speak about your own personal experiences.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you so much.
Well, Submit the Stigma. I'm going to go to therapy right now. I actually do have a therapist appointment at 4:30, so go to therapy.
Great. Oh, yeah.
Thank you so much for coming on, and we'll make sure we share everything on our Instagram and our social media to do as much as we can to raise awareness for you guys.
Thanks so much for taking time to be here. It was it's aside from the great work you do as martial artists, it's an honor to talk to you as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for having me too. Glad we could finally make this work.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.